Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So sorry for today's upload being a little bit late, but we are going to be doing another traditional drawing video today, and the lovely people at Arrtx actually sent me a little Christmas gift this year, so I wanted to check out some of the supplies that they sent me. The first one was the acrylic marker set that you guys have seen just there, and they are just like markers with acrylic paint in them. Next is the metallic watercolors, which has some really lovely colors and these really cute little shaped pans. Yeah, so metallic watercolor paints. Next up, we have these Saki, I don't explain these. These are like travel size watercolor brushes, which I really like. I never actually owned any travel size watercolor brushes before that are like this. So basically they come in their little case and then you can assemble them by, you know, removing one side and shoving that other side into the other end to make it a lot longer and more comfortable for you to hold. I do like the fact that they're metal, so like if I accidentally let them sit in water or anything, the paint and stuff from wood wouldn't come off. It also comes in this really cute carrying case that you can just shove into your bag, just in case if the cap does get a little loose, your brushes won't fray or anything like that, so you can kind of keep them nice and safe like this. Yeah, really cute. But because of today, I do want to do a little bit of painting, so the supplies for today are not going to be exactly the main focus, like the ones that they sent me. So I'm going to be using them to help accent the pieces, or no, the piece that I'm doing today. So yeah. But let me show you guys a little bit of swatching and just like general use of the supplies that they sent me. I also realized that in the marker set, the acrylic marker set, they came with like these little stickers. So I put them on the markers. I'm not too sure if that's what you're supposed to do. There wasn't really any instructions, but I did that because because they're stickers, so I'm supposed to be putting them somewhere clearly, but the markers do not have like numbers or labels on them that show what color they are, like what they are. So I decided to put the stickers on them and then do my swatches and then use the numbers to correlate to my swatches, which makes it a lot easier. Next up is obviously the metallic watercolor paints, and I'm going to be using the brush that it came with to help me do my swatches. Now I do notice a little bit later, maybe I'll talk about when we get to the painting section. So these are metallic watercolor paints, so they do have like a little bit of shimmer and a little bit of glitter, so it's really nice and pretty, especially if you hold it up to the light. You can kind of use it to accent your pieces if you want to add some sparkle or some glitter to whatever piece you're working on, which is what I'm going to be doing today. So I've never really painted a whole entire piece with metallic paint. I'm not sure how exactly that would work. And this color palette that they have for the metallic watercolors, actually one that I've never really had. I've always had really much like pearlescent colors that are more muted, or pretty much like strictly silver and gold. So it's really nice that there's a different color selection for metallic paints. Okay, so let's talk about who I'm drawing today and just like the process. So I'm drawing Alban Knox from Niji-sanji En, and he's part of Arrtx. He is like one of my favorites to watch, so I wanted to draw him today because I thought it'd be fun to use his color scheme for what I want to use the markers and the metallic paint to help accent with, if that makes sense. So Alban has very much orange and black and dark gray for his general attire. His hair is more of like a soft muted brown. He has some really cool sunglasses, which I decided to include. I usually don't draw him with the sunglasses because I like drawing faces a lot. It's my preferred thing to draw usually. I love drawing like just the face and the hair and stuff, and I feel like sunglasses usually block the face a little bit. But because of the color selection we have, plus metallic paints, I thought it maybe would be fun to add metallic paints to his sunglasses. So we'll get to that a little bit. But for painting, I don't know if you guys noticed, I did switch from the Saki brush, which is like the travel size portable watercolor brush thing, to my usual, I do not remember the brand. I think it's like the Raphael Kolinsky brush in the size 8. I didn't talk about this actually. The Saki brush that Arrtx gave comes in a size 2 and a size 8. Size 8 is usually my favorite to work with, along with size 6. I've been gravitating towards more like number 8 rounds, if anything. And yeah, I'll give my opinion on a little bit later, because there is some good things and bad things about the brush itself, and it's nothing to do with like the setup of it or anything like that, or like the feeling of it. It's just, I think it's the bristles and the hair, because I'm a little bit more particular. So for the paper, I decided to whip out my Paul Rubens hot press paper, and I believe it's 7 by 10, something around there. It's not quite 8.5 by 11, but it is larger than 5.5 by 7. And yeah, I've been really liking hot press for the most part, and this one is a kind of block, so you do have to cut away the page. I forgot to show that in the video, so I might leave Alban on the block until I decide to do a little bit more painting, which I would like to do more next year. Maybe I'll do a video on like kind of like tiny little art goals I want to do for next year, and a lot of them I feel like it's more pertaining to either trying like new stuff in terms of, I don't know, like illustrating and stuff, or traditional art, because I feel like I've been lacking that too much in the recent years, and I still really love traditional art so much. Sketching with pencil and watercolor is still one of my favorite mediums. Like, other than digital art like fills a different niche for me, while traditional art, like painting and sketching, kind of feels like there's a certain void I miss. And yeah, okay, so I did do the sketch with the Pilot Color Eno in the color red first, as kind of like a light sketch and kind of like preparation, and then after that I moved with the Prismacolor Kohl Erase and the color Carmine to do kind of like tight lines, as well as lines that won't really disappear when I do my watercolor washes and stuff. So because I didn't really have a direct plan going in, I just knew I wanted to draw Alban, and I want him to be kind of like reaching for his glasses in some sort of way, so it's not obstructing his face too much. And I wanted to utilize the vibrancy of his outfit with the bright oranges, but also the reflection of his glasses, as well as the amount of black in his outfit. Because initially I wanted to use the acrylic paint markers, which are definitely more opaque. They're not as opaque as some markers that you have to pump to, what is it called, prep very much, but I think these ones are a little bit more, like, they're a little bit more clean. They have a nice tip to them, as well as I feel like they're just a little bit more portable. Like, I don't think you have to really worry about them exploding or anything like that. But I wanted to use like the opaqueness and the bright colors from that set to maybe do some, I don't know how to, like, graphic elements over top of Alban, but I got a little bit scared. I was gonna either do like maybe like a signature or a watermark like right directly on top of him with the orange and black, or even like blue, or we could add like fun elements weaving kind of like behind him to the front of him, so you can kind of give this weird sense of depth, but it's like kind of contrasting with the flatness of the markers that are super like opaque and stuff, because it gives you a nice smooth like flat finish, which I think it would be fun to juxtapose against like something a little bit more rendered. I always like, I don't know what the artist's name, they do these like beautiful acrylic paintings, and they have like these really jarring cuts in their painting of, usually, I think I usually see it's like kind of a pale pink, and sometimes it looks like a ribbon cutting throughout like the character. I don't know. If I can remember the artist's name, I will try to find it. I do believe I follow them on Instagram, so it's somewhere over there. But like I said, I don't end up doing that. I don't know how to explain it. I'll do some other way to add some opaque elements and to kind of put them on top of Alban as well as behind him, so we can get a little bit of depth. But I just wanted to give it a little bit of a try, if anything. So when I was doing the kind of like last step of line work on his face and just the rest of him, I decided to switch brushes to the Saki brush again. So the brush for this, like the Saki brush, I do really like. But let me get into the gripe first, and then kind of ways you can kind of work around it if you really need to. So past me, who used to use size 6 brush, or size 5, like 5 to 6 round watercolor brush for pretty much anything and everything watercolor related, probably would have liked this brush a lot more. But the fact that I'm kind of painting a little bit larger lately, as well as I'm relying on a little bit bigger washes, and now I'm working on hot press paper, which kind of sucks in the paint a little bit quicker than cold press, I find. It makes the brush feel a little bit bit too dry, if that makes sense. So usually the bristles of a brush, there's kind of like different kind of hairs and stuff that you can get. So some people use like squirrel hair, weasel hair. There's some like other ones, maybe horsehair or something like that. But basically some of the brushes that kind of like look the same visually like on the outside, but the amount of water that the brush can hold is kind of hard to test out if you haven't really done it yourself. But for me, the Raphael Kolinsky is my favorite still. It still holds a lot of water. I know a lot of people use like sumi brushes or squirrel hair brushes to do like big washes, anything that requires like a really wet brush stroke. And when I'm doing the initial layer of doing like base colors, or I'm trying to cover a whole surface really quickly without the paper drying so we don't get weird harsh edges. So when I was doing the face, you might have saw that there was some blotchiness, and I tried to remedy that by adding a lot more water than taking it away, because I got into a weird spot where things were drying a little bit too quickly, and then I tried to add more paint to it, but it just ended up getting darker. But then I also have like the lines of where the previous wash dried. So the Saki brush just doesn't hold enough water in my opinion, but I don't think it's gonna be too much of a problem if you do work a little bit smaller and are not doing like such large washes, like covering a large area at once. So yeah, I don't think it's too much of a detriment. It's just kind of like preference for myself. I did use the Saki brush for the details as well as the line work. It has a beautiful point at the very end that holds its shape super nicely. And I think it's also because of how it holds the paint and the water. I was able to get consistent lines without like it skipping, and it was nice and consistent, which I feel like is something that I struggled with recently because I refused to change brushes lately. So yeah, I would definitely consider using the Saki brushes if I want to do more finer details or like the line work for my pieces, because I don't mind that size 8. It still creates like really tiny lines that I need, but they come with the size 2 as well, so if you would really want to, you could definitely use size 2 to do any of the smaller details. I switched over to the metallic paints to add a little bit of highlight and a little bit of pop of shimmer in some areas. So I did a light wash, or as light as I could, to his shades, so that when it hits the light it kind of captures a little bit, which I think kind of just brings it a little bit of a cooler finish and just adds a little bit of different texture to the piece. I added it in his little hair clip things as well as like little edges, but then I realized that I am going to be adding some more refined details with the acrylic paint markers. So I'm kind of treating this as my replacement for adding white gouache to some of my watercolor pieces, which I used to do to get like thin hair details, replacing anything that needs to have an opaque white. So let's say the highlight of the eyes, if I accidentally screwed that up. Oh, I was doing testing, so you can see that I did that in my other sketchbook where I kind of planned out maybe doing like a little cat face with his name and maybe 03 on top of like the bottom right hand corner, but I got super intimidated and I decided to do just confetti. And to put some details and stuff into the back, I decided to do 03, just because like this number shows up on his outfit, so I wanted to stick that in kind of like it looks like behind him, so I made sure not to overlap the hair or his hand. So I'm just putting that with a matte black, and I'm gonna let this dry. So what I noticed from the markers is that on the case, or like the box, it does say that it is water-based, which got me a little bit worried because I was using it alongside watercolor, but I wanted to see whether or not I could blend the marker with water, which I don't know if it defeats the purpose because it says it can be used on a bunch of different surfaces, but I'm not sure if it's supposed to be meant as a non-permanent thing. But I did do a little testing, and once it's fully dried, it does not budge. So there is a little bit of pigment that comes off of it, but I think it's because I was deteriorating the paper from adding too much water to see if I could budge the pigment. So if you decide to use this on surfaces, most likely it won't come off too much. But yeah, you can see that on certain areas, especially the confetti that's like directly on top of Alban, I have to do at least 2 to 3 passes because I think because the marker ink is coming from a brush tip rather than like those bullet nibs that you've seen like on Posca markers and stuff, the ink is not as opaque, but because it dries and it's not exactly reactivatable by moisture, you can just easily layer up if you need to. I found that a lot of the cooler colors, or I guess like you'll see a little bit later, I add more of a blue, like a dark blue, and the black is kind of more opaque. The orange required a little bit of layering, and then some of the like the white as well as the yellows and light oranges require a little bit of layering, but I found it really nice to use it for accenting like the edges of my watercolor pieces. Or if you flick the edge of it, you can see I did it in his shades with the white. If you flick it, it kind of fades, so it's kind of really nice. You can kind of utilize the flexibility of the brush tip, which I think is really cool. I did a little bit of testing in the sketchbook, so I did a little bit of blue swatches there, kind of put it next to him to see if this blue is a little bit too jarring. I do wish I added it somewhere else, or I maybe added the light blue somewhere else on Alban himself, so that it doesn't read too jarring. But I feel like blue and orange always work well together, and it's still a color combination I truly adore. So yeah, I don't think it looks too off. I did add a drop shadow to all the confetti by adding the black underneath, and then for the 03 on the left hand corner, I decided to do a drop shadow of orange just to make it stand out. Yeah, one day when I'm a little less chicken, maybe I'll do something a little bit more graphic with the acrylic paint markers with a painting or something, or a drawing, so that it can really stand out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. Apologies that I was a little bit late. Hope you guys had a wonderful Christmas, and hopefully you have a still wonderful holiday into before the New Year's, I guess. See you later. Bye!